when you are seeking for authentic pleasure, not just random pleasure, not just somebody else's pleasure, when you're seeking for your own authentic pleasure, you can only find your own authentic self, your truth. You can only uncover yourself, your whole. That's the destination. That's the being. That's the all.
Hey, Beth. How's it going?
Hi. I feel very chilled after 3 breaths.
I know, right? That's why I love hitting a little bit of intentional breathing right beforehand. It gets it all nice and yummy and all equalized, whatever's going on inside. So tell me, what is your intention for this conversation?
When second breath was happening, I thought, I'm just so looking forward to enjoying time with you and having this conversation. And on a grander scale, it is actually to discover something for myself around authenticity, pleasure. What's stopping it? What can it open up? Yeah. So, and in that discovery, like between the two of us, I love podcasts because it's total eavesdropping. And I love eavesdropping because we find things about ourselves when we eavesdrop on other people, either our reactions to what we're hearing, or we wish we could like jump into the conversation. So my intention is that people eavesdrop and get something from that pleasure that I have with you.
This is great. I've never heard that one before, eavesdropping. It's like, I heard it through the grapevine. We're going to see what we hear through the grapevine and see what pops and shows up. I am so with that. And for me, what I usually do this, I write this on my arm these days, but I write my intention for the day on my arm. Today is energy and passion, which is the product of realizing that energy and passion has been lacking in my life, that I have been so I've been disciplined. I've been working my ass off. I've been trying really hard. But what I realize is that I don't have to do it on my own, and that I can ask for support, and that energy and that passion, I think, is an energy that's gotten stymied from me feeling like I have to do it on my own all the time. And I want to allow that to flow through, because I'm a better person and the world is a better place when I am in good energy and good passion. I believe that the same thing for other people when we're in good energy and in good passion. So I want to bring energy and passion to this conversation and dive into some pleasurable conversations.
They're very aligned. Love it. This is going to be fun.
Sweet. Now I want to dive into what you do and your title behind the pleasure world. But before we do that, I want to create a little context. This in reality is only probably our third conversation ever, I think.
Yeah, actually, I think full on, like second full on, but that was a good first conversation. Like that was a definite, like that felt like more than one conversation.
Yeah, that's probably where I got 2 from. It just felt like 2 because there was such a strong, dense nutritional value to it.
Yeah.
So we met through a business development event, and then I was very captivated naturally by the energy that you brought. Hence, that's funny. Energy, the energy that you brought. Yep. See, there was an alignment there on purpose, but the energy that you brought to the space, you had passion about what you were talking about. This is really weird that this is coming full circle. No, but like, it's like, not just to like, because it's like, oh, play on words. Like, no, but seriously, you had an energy and a passion about what you did that was absolutely contagious. It was very infectious. Immediately, I was like, I don't fully understand and grok what you do, but I know that I want to have a conversation with you. And then naturally in our first conversation, I realized, I want to sit down and have a conversation with this woman, because that was when I was introduced to the first and only person that I know as being a pleasure coach.
Woo! I feel like
the great reveal. The great reveal.
That felt exciting to me. That's really really hilarious. Yeah, no, that was a pretty awesome conversation. So I love that you went with your intuition, and that's actually what's cool about energy and passion, to continue this, because it does draw us in. It draws us in toward the thing, whether it's our own energy or passion or someone else's. So I love that. That's cool.
Even you saying that, I wondered, the energy and passion that we experience in others is, in a way, if we find it to be that infectious, maybe it's in a weird way, it's like soul's way of saying, that's us. Maybe we've forgotten, or, that's something that I want to reflect more of in my life. Because quite frankly, if I could have the type of passion and energy that you do about what I do as a level of being, not something I have to like force and contrive, but just like a level of being, that to me, I imagine if anybody had as much, I don't know if the word is zest, but just like this fiery energy about what they do as you do, I think that in general, people would be happier in their work environments, and thusly that would affect every other aspect, sexually, intimate relationships, family, work, and other related areas. And I'm curious, because we have so much to dive into what you do, where do you suppose that energy comes from, or that passion for what you do really comes from?
Wow, there's so many things I felt like jumping off on what you said. And so, yeah, I'll try to answer that directly. I answer a lot indirect sometimes. So this will be fun.
Here we go.
Coaster ride. Okay. It's so interesting because I was so dead. I was the opposite of passion and energy. Okay. It really was. I, even at a point, was in a psych ward. So here we go. Let's go on this roller coaster ride.
Deep.
Because I was clinically diagnosed with depression and was really not coping well with life. And as I discovered, looking back or along my journey, checking back, what the heck went on there? What was that about? Is that I really was so shut down around pleasure, passion, my truth, who I am, that it showed up as intense emotion bottled up. And depression, I'll call it a couple of different things, but it's definitely all directed at self. It's all this pent up emotion, often just packaged nicely in rage, and then directed at self. And in that space, there's not a lot of room, because there's not a lot of room to breathe and find passion and pleasure and self, because you got to go through the eruption of all of that emotion to get out. So I went through the eruption of the emotion to get out, and it was slightly messy. There was definite shrapnel and debris and all of this. So that all that to say is, what brought me here was, I think at some point I couldn't do that any longer, and I'm really, really glad that happened for me. And I don't know if it happens for everyone. I think a lot of us feel a deadness, and a lot of us are dead and we don't feel it. I think there's this awkward place sometimes where we feel the deadness and we don't know that we can get to the other side of it. And that's what I think depression and mental health struggle issues are. When you actually have an awareness, a hope in hell, because you have an awareness, this is not for me, but you don't have a hope because you can't imagine something on the other side. So for me, the passion and the zest or the vibrancy or whatever this is that shows up with me is that it's like I fought my way through all of that. And I really aim, and at this point, and this is 6 years after my awakening, at this point, I really, really aim that every moment feels like my authentic pleasure moment. It's truly a satisfying moment. And it doesn't mean I'm happy all the time. Yesterday, I was in a really blah state. But in those blah states, I get to ask myself, and now as a practice, okay, what is it I truly desire? What is I really long for right now? And even just asking that. Anyway, so I get really excited because I know where I came from. And I know that it's actually way easier than even I did it, because I've sped up my ability to uncover all that debris. And so it's really one of the most, I feel privileged and honored when people start to unfold out of that and realize, oh my God, pleasure actually is okay and it exists and I get it. And there's this like beautiful like artwork, nature, like whatever you can imagine that's stunning to you. That's what I get to witness. Like, so I get really excited about that.
Do you think that it was the byproduct of you diving into your own pleasurable experiences that had that transition out of regular depression into perhaps a regular elevated states of being? Do you think that it was through that journey of
I would tell you that one of the things that I spent 20 plus years in therapy. So I've been always wanting to fix and make myself happy. It's been kind of a theme for me. Sure. I'm 46. So 26 of those years, well, post have been 6 and then pre before that. So let's say 20 of my years, so I'm just kind of giving you like a sense because it was a slow burn to what took me from there to here. Because in college was when my depression started, but I didn't get clinically diagnosed until my 30s. And so there was a long time where I really didn't know what to do and how to do it. And I kept spiraling down. So I can tell you though, that there was, it seems like May oh my gosh, it's May. So it seems like May is the time every year something drastic happens. And about 6 years ago, I always lose track if it's 5 or 6, but 6 years ago, I'm going to say, was when this massive thing shifted for me. And this is really when I started to even consider pleasure. And I didn't even call it pleasure at that time. I really didn't. I called it letting go. I didn't understand pleasure at that time. And so what it was is I started to really analyze, I'd analyzed again, 20 plus years, remember? Okay. But there was this time where I just started to use the artist way method. I love it. 3 morning pages. And in that time, so every weird. Morning is I just wrote, but anytime there was like this weird thought or belief or feeling, I would just write down a belief. And what came out was these series of beliefs that I started to then dissect, almost like, thank God I never had to dissect a frog or anything disgusting. I don't know how I missed out on that in high school, but I'm glad I did. But I dissected my belief systems. And today, still to this day, I do this. But it was so monumental because I dissected my beliefs enough that it shook it all up. And I used to literally roll in my head saying, I'm shit, I'm shit, I'm shit. And I did a lot of cognitive therapy, but that thing wouldn't get out of there. And then so I'm shit. It was just kind of a way. It was a truth. And it was in this time period in the May 6 years ago where I'm shit no longer could hold truth for me. It all of a sudden just wasn't true. And what replaced it was I'm awesome. That's a pretty extreme shift in belief, but it's what happened. And it was, and in that moment, I had space to actually consider what do I want or what's possible. And I did not use those words. That's the weirdest thing. I used the words, oh, I want to let go. I want to let go. Like I felt this weight. I felt everything heavy and rah. And I just wanted to let go. So it was like at this point I realized, oh, I could let go of that weight. I guess was the awareness I had at that time. Yeah. And it moved on. And I'm realizing now I can speak plainly. This is about pleasure, authentic pleasure.
Yeah, but it didn't start as pleasure. It started as a deep, crippling depression that would weigh on you every single day, I would imagine, or to some degree every single day, which I can resonate with. And I'm sure many can resonate with that experience of depression, which at first I wouldn't have called it that. For me, it started in college too. And that was the byproduct of just a series of unfortunate events. And I'm not talking about the book or the movie. That is also a series of unfortunate events, but my own series of unfortunate events. And thinking back on it now, it's easy for me to forget that in those moments, there wasn't such a thing as having some long-term vision for my life that, I so presently work on a regular basis, where I'm like thinking like, who do I aspire to remember myself to be? Because I'm starting to remove the word becoming from my vocabulary and remembering or rather doing remembering, because I like the idea that I came into this world as I was designed to be. And I'm just remembering how to be that versus I have to strive up a mountain to achieve that thing one day.
Love that.
in my remembering, I mean, I remember, as you said, like feeling like you're dead. Lately, I've been like the Walking Dead. I've been playing with it as being not that it's really this black and white, but as either being awake or asleep. And to be asleep is to be kind of monotonously living out the experiences of your past, the beliefs, the thoughts, the things that we were subjected to either through external sources or even internal, although I think a lot of times it starts externally, but then we embody it internally and then that multiplies itself. Mm-hmm. And I just remember being a zombie every day. I remember not wanting to get out of bed. I remember not socializing with anybody. And I remember years later when I talked to my parents about it for the first time, they had no idea.
Yeah.
Or at least they think they had an idea. But I definitely didn't open up to them about it.
Mm-hmm.
And to go from something like that to now being on my own journey of like curiously exploring, well, what does this pleasure, what does this look like? Because for me, I'm the first to know that my journey in my own sexuality has been taboo. It has been blocked off. It's been put with the yellow tape that they put across murder scenes.
Yes. The caution.
We don't go there. We're not allowed to. That's the way it was brought up for me. So like my body in its own right is like this foreign object. Like, what does this do? And it's being able to shift from being in this always asleep state, which is draining and tiring, into I want to be energized. I want to be passionate. I want to experience pleasure and not have it be this awful, terrible thing that becomes benign because it's supposed to be kept behind closed doors and never to be discussed. But I think what's so brilliant about what you're doing is showing people we need to be talking about it. We need to be creating safe spaces for people to learn, because there are plenty of people like myself whom they feel like Martians to their own body sometimes. And that can be maddening, especially in like a sexual context. You know, like if I'm in a relationship with a partner, which this has been a common theme for me, is very charged women. And like my charge is like, I'm always operating on 10 to 15 to 20% battery life. And I make myself wrong. I'm like, damn it. Like I don't have that much fucking battery life. How do you have so much battery life? Like, and like, I'm so like disciplined on it, but that's something you can't force or fudge. Like that is a raw, natural energy. And it's so fitting, I think, and I think this is going to tie perfectly to something I want to ask you, which is, it was just this morning, I came up with energy and passion as my intention. I wrote it on my forearm and I said, what chakra is that connected to? And when I looked it up, it said the sacral chakra, which is also the chakra that's home for pleasure and sexuality and creativity, which are all things I've been stymied in. And I'm just like, wow. And when I just realized it, right when we started this conversation, I was like, oh shit, we are going to be talking about exactly what I was researching this morning. Okay, this is perfect. And now here we are talking about all of it. And I'm grateful that this is what is about to envelop with you right now.
This is why I get so excited, because it's like that moments like that happen constantly when we pause to talk about pleasure. It's so often we don't pause to talk about pleasure or even think about pleasure. We get kind of caught in moments that should be pleasurable, or we recall moments that should have been pleasurable, or we happen upon, luckily, wow, that was awesome. And then we relive it forever, or we plan for the next. But to actually ponder pleasure, like we might ponder the next meal, or we might ponder our career. We don't tend to ponder it. And it makes sense why. I'm the same. I grew up in a very loving home, very, very loving community. It was actually a very small. It was even outside of a small town. It was a very small community, probably called a hamlet. And so like we were right next door to the church, and our flavor of cultural and religious kind of upbringing was Christian evangelical. And it was very much a central part because my parents had just gotten involved in it. And in that religion, they were born again as adults. And so their fervor was quite strong. And so we were brought up that way. And I am INFJ. I'm a total type system nerd, Myers-Briggs, which is like the Mother Teresa type. Okay. Not saying I'm Mother Teresa, far from her, but I am a kind of person that can really be, I called it like I'm a believer type, right? I'm a believer. And so it really fed me. Religion fed a lot of what I long for as a personality. But that conversation around pleasure and intimacy and body was really to the bottom and not even to be trusted, let alone pleasure in your body. But really, like, if you look at us as mind, body, soul, then mind was kind of to the wayside. Some people in religion embrace mind and some don't, but in religion, they definitely embrace soul. And so soul got like front and center, body got bottom and really should be ignored, and mind somewhere, depending on what kind of culture, religion you were in, like it was side soul or it was, relegated. Anyway, I won't go into that, but, yeah. And so we didn't have the conversation from young. I got I'll share boldly here because I think this is important. As a young girl, as young children, we are tactile. Oh my gosh, excuse me. We are tactile, and how we learn is tactilely. We touch to learn. And so we touch our bodies. And so there was a time I was touching my body and I was enjoying it. I was very young. I was probably 5, 4, something like that. And my mom was so concerned for my soul that was a bad thing, right? For her, that was in her early learning of religion. That was a bad thing. And so she had some sort of reaction. I don't even remember what it was, but from then on in, any touching of my body that was pleasurable got hidden. And so
at 4?
Yeah. I can remember because it was at a certain home where we lived. And I remember the incident. I don't remember the conversation or even the look, but I remember after that, behind couches, in closed doors, like I would still do that because it felt really wonderful and it saved me from going pee in the middle of the night when I was scared of things. Anyway, I'm wondering if I've said that at workshops, and I know I'm not alone in that. So,
I'm sure we all have our own variation of that because it was like the phallic stage in, was it not Erikson? Is it Piaget? We all go through it.
Right. I forget which. Yeah.
I don't remember. I think Erikson was the mental versus the Piaget's, which I think, or was Piaget's cognitive. I don't know. I'll have to go do my research now. This is how it happens full circle. Okay. Yeah. So you were shamed young as a child.
Yeah. Around body and pleasure, the combo. It was so confusing. Yes. So yeah, I was shamed. And so then that's like when you're saying like the conversation, or we're talking about the conversation of having pleasure even front and center, we didn't register it. We're like, we're both sharing that in our college ages, there was this deadness and there was no connection to pleasure because it's been dropped off so long ago for so many of us. Not everyone had the same degree, but there's a range. Yeah. And there's some who, heightened experience of that kind of shame. So.
Yeah, I think that actually you brought this up when in our first conversation, or only other conversation apparently, was how I guess it's not for every person, but maybe this is a perfect tie-in. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but either way, it seems like a perfect tie-in. We had talked about the erotic blueprint and how people, based off of their, I think it's five styles.
Yes. Yeah.
That they have what I would guess and imagine would be primary motivators. And a lot of times the primary motivators are things like shame and guilt. And, or at least I think you're going to describe this way better than I could, but the fact that you're pointing out shame and guilt, I think that is a common, way too common experience is, especially around sexuality, is that it is, as we mentioned, is taboo, and anything that when we start to walk into that ballpark, there's immediately signs that warn you, say, stay the fuck away, because this is not, you don't come near here. And there's
they get larger as you get closer. Yeah.
Yes. There's more of them, and there's a fine and it says, watch out, canine dogs, even there's no dogs actually there. They just have all of these various forms of literature and other things that are, designed to, create fear and shame and guilt around all of it. But talk to me about this, because I believe this is a foundational teaching of yours, correct? Is around the erotic blueprint and how it can, I would imagine, start to unlock our pleasurable potential, or potentiality for pleasure.
Yeah, but pleasure potential, that is nice. It is a really big part of my own personal journey, and then now what I really bring into my work. Overriding the framework I really share with people is around pleasure first, which is why I align so much with the person who created Erotic Blueprints, because she says that all the time. Her name's Jaya May, and she created this after 20 plus years doing somatic work, tantra, all kinds of things with clients. And she's kept seeing this pattern. But it didn't really click until her own relationship went weird, like way off. And so she started really diving in, because we only do this hard work because we're like, wait,
what about me?
What about me? Right. And so she dove in, and then she would go back and examine, and then all of her clients, and she noticed there was this consistent pattern of what really was like the pleasure zone of different people. So what's their superpower? What is it when someone's really they've moved all that shame away? What is the delicious they're experiencing? And she saw these 5 different, and then each of the 5 different types have a shadow, because we're not constantly without our own blocks, because I agree with you. We're finding ourselves, we're uncovering that truth, our authentic version. And I'm right there with you. I spent so many years fixing myself, so many years thinking that was just what had to happen. Not even like finding a future version. It was like fixing this broken thing. But in fact, no, it's uncovering and finding. And so when we're on that journey, and there's these distinct ways that in pleasure, when we're approaching pleasure or in a situation where it's to be pleasurable, sometimes those things pop up that are still in our way of our authentic self. And they're consistent. There's consistency. And then for all of the types, there's a turn on type. And so this was massive for me. My own journey helped me to see that there's like a pleasure method of living your life, and focusing first on aiming for authentic pleasure was the way to go, as opposed to trying to fix yourself. Because we're trying always like, okay, what should I do better at? Or what should I fix? And there's like a forcing, and there's like a kind of disciplining. And I'm not saying that force and discipline don't have their place, but you actually gain more momentum and energy when you're seeking after something you long for. And so you're not having to strive and put so much energy into this thing we call life and finding the best, most enjoyable version of our life when you're aiming for pleasure. And here's the thing, the moment you aim for pleasure, and I will come back to the Erotic Blueprints, I just want to kind of set the stage for it, because if we jump into Erotic Blueprints too soon, what I find people think is that pleasure is just this tiny, narrow part of our life. And It's not. Yeah. And so when we aim for pleasure, we actually, when we're aiming for the real deal, not those like short-lived things, not those like surface kind of pleasure, but like the deep soul feeding, body feeding, every part of us feeding kind, we're satisfied. For sure, the things that are blocking us will show up constantly. Like the minute you want to go and have Haagen-Dazs is always the thing I'll talk about. If that's really your authentic pleasure, which like most of the time it is for me, there will be things that block me from it. Oh, you shouldn't have it. Oh, you're too fat. Oh, you don't have enough money to spend on that exorbitant thing, whatever. Like these were different stages of my life, because Haagen-Dazs has been with me for a very long time.
It's been through thick and thin.
It's been through thick and thin. So anyway, so inside of that, like discovering your authentic pleasure, when I kind of, started learning what this was, about 3 years into my work with people around authentic pleasure and how to remove the shame or those pleasure blocks that popped up, what I realized is that there was like this missing way to communicate it to self and to others. And so a good person in my world said, oh my gosh, you have to meet this person, do her coaching program. So I did. And I got trained as an Erotic Blueprint coach. And there's about 150 of us now across the globe doing this work because it's so powerful. And to me,
Wait, you're at one of 150?
Yeah.
Shit. Okay, continue.
Yes, it's so exciting to have.
We are in the presence of greatness, people.
You already knew that. Come on.
I did, and it just furthered it. If your credibility wasn't already outstanding, 1 in 150 in the world, that's pretty astounding.
That's funny. I never really thought of it that way. So it's like when you can like find out that you actually may have like, because we all love type systems, but when you can actually put like a language to it, you can put a classification. That's why our brains, that's where our minds are very, very useful. They're constantly trying to classify things. Yeah. And what's useful about that is classification helps us find meaning and helps us to explain to ourselves and discover and explore. Yeah. Anyway, well, I could go on and on. I'll give you like room to speak. Yeah, I've lost track of where we were and what I was answering.
No, it's perfectly fine. Quite frankly, I'm sure I don't remember the original question either, but something that did come up for me inside of that was something that I'm curious about, which is I've recently started gently paying attention to the concepts of like hedonism and stoicism and more recently Taoism and the middle way, if you will. And I'm curious how the concepts of pleasure and how it plays into these various concepts. So in hedonism, as I've come to understand it, it's people who are constantly seeking pleasurable experiences, people who are wanting to ride that high life wave all the time, versus stoicism, which is like, more like abstinence and abstaining from those types of things. And then Taoism in a way says it's about moderation. It's about being somewhere in the middle as it pertains to, I would say, sensory input, sensory stimulation. That's probably more what I'm looking for. And I'm curious how that plays out in your own mapping of it all. And if there is perhaps, what are the different types of pleasure? Is there such as like the quick fling, like the wrong type of like fake ecstasy, if you will, versus like this ecstatic bliss and dance that happens from like this internal revelation and realization of one's, potentiality. How do you decipher between pleasure seeking to this extent of hedonism, which, as I've understood it, often leads to more problems than it does good? Right, the drinking of alcohol, the constant need for sex, and the constant need for Haagen-Dazs or whatever it is. How do we distinguish? Because we all have our vices. Yeah. Masturbation was an avoidance tool for me for a while. It was never sacred. It was always, I need to avoid this pain. Let me masturbate. Yeah. How do we distinguish between an avoidance of something versus something that actually channels energy and passion into every aspect of our life?
I'm so glad that you've been studying these three things and that you asked that question, because that is where, for me, along the line, I started to call it authentic pleasure, not pleasure.
Okay.
Because I for me, Haagen-Dazs literally did become a thing for me, because addiction is on that other side when you're just chasing after what I call empty pleasure, surface pleasure. What are the other terms people use? There's other... like the negative ways we view negative pleasure, why it became the thing you shouldn't do, right? There was a reason why culture, religion said no to pleasure, because they were trying to manage against the excess, the addiction, right? And so there is a real thing to be aware of. And so that's when I realized, there's a distinction here to make. It's authentic pleasure. And this is where we get to see the connection between finding our authentic self through pleasure, because everyone's authenticity around pleasure is unique to themselves, and it's a dynamic thing. So, and what I define as authentic is, just to try to simplify it for myself. My background's accounting. So I think in Excel spreadsheets. And so I'm trying to simplify a thing that for me was very complex. And I really needed to like pull it apart and look at, because I asked all these questions. So for me, the authentic pleasure, which then guards against the hedonism and also guards against the stoicism, is that the right way to say it? But being avoidant of pleasure and allows you to find what's true to you, are they aligned with your core values? And these are things that you live for. You literally live for. On those days where you think that you cannot get out of bed, you're still existing because of something. And so these core values help to define those. You'll also die for them. People will go fight wars based on their core values, right? They'll go and fight against someone they love based on their core values. So these are really, really important to be part of the framework of what is authentic in pleasure for you. But that's a very heady thing sometimes. And so you have to also add in your life's intentions. And this I got from, I've lost her name. There's a woman who does work on the energy of money. And money, we talked about chakras, money and sex and passion, they're all in the same chakra. It's all around your value and your creativity and your core. And it's, and so she, that was a piece that I got aware of. Wow, your authentic pleasure really has to also align with your life's intentions. And what I mean by life's intentions is, who are you being if you're fulfilling your life's intentions? So if you're going to climb a mountain, who are you being? Well, you might be brave, you might be adventurous, and you might be slightly crazy. So if your life every day does not feed that brave person, that adventurous person, and that slightly crazy person, you're probably not aligned with your authentic self, your authentic pleasure. But then that was still even kind of like, oh, it wasn't really grounded enough into like everyday practicality for me. And so then I kept going forward. And that's where Erotic Blueprints came in, because I realized, oh my gosh, there's pleasure types. And that's when the love and my nerdiness around type systems just went bing, 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 bing. Your pleasure types are like a rounding out of who you are as a personality, and not to box people in, but just to start like pointing to a bit about who yourself is, starting to discover aspects of yourself. So like Enneagram, Strengths Finder, Myers-Briggs, any good, like anything that allows you to discover aspects that you might relate to. And Erotic Blueprint feeds into that. And the creator of Erotic Blueprint, she did this in the context of sexual pleasure, but you could call it pleasure blueprint also. And I'll share with you more on that if you want to know, but I'll pause. But that's, to me, when you're aligning your pleasure, any pleasure, we get inundated. At least here in Canada, I'm up in Toronto, Canada, in the US, it's a very odd culture of very pleasure obsessed, but it's also pleasure repressed. And it causes this strange place of, we think we should do pleasure this way, but we shouldn't do pleasure the way we really want to. And so authentic pleasure allows us to navigate away from those addictive and self-destructive behaviors.
Okay, so this is really cool. This is at least how it's piecing together in my brain. You just said we're obsessed with pleasure, but at the same time we are oppressed. And naturally what I find, my own personal life experiences of a 24-year-old on his way, is that oftentimes the thing that we want the most is the thing that we can't have. We want to touch the red button. We want to fucking touch that red button because you told me I can't. And by nature, you're telling me I can. I want to touch the red button. I want to hit it 100 times now that you've told me not to do it. Right. And I think, which is especially even really interesting, it's difficult. There's no manual for parenting, but when parents say, kids don't do this, this, and this, then they go do every single one of them times a million in college, because now they're like, yeah, my parents aren't here to do whatever the hell I want to do. But your point about the strong desire for, but the oppression, how I was just pointing at hedonism versus stoicism, which would say the avoidance of it versus the overindulgence of it. And then the middle way being, as I understand it, Taoism is this the moderation. It's being able to, I would imagine the authentic pleasure is being able to distinguish between what is authentic for me versus what am I using to, as I have been playing a lot with recently, is filling a hole versus becoming whole.
Oh, wow. That's great. I'm sorry, I got to cut you off, because that is a great gauge for your authentic pleasure. That is great. I would even say maybe if there could, I love Taoism. Like, I've started to dabble in learning about it and bringing it into play. Moderation I'm not a big fan of the word moderation as a practice alone. I really, really believe we have to find our own version, because excess, what might appear excessive to someone, might actually be your authentic. So moderation can often dampen your own authentic pleasure, because that's very relative. What's excessive? What's moderate? I don't know. So, but so how you just said that, can you repeat that? Because I feel like that's a really lovely gauge. That is a good question to ask, an internal check.
Yeah. Am I doing this to fill a hole or become whole?
Yeah. Brilliant. I'm literally going to write that down.
That's lately, there's a few things I've been running with. That's a big theme. And of course, even in the becoming whole, I think it's more of a remembering, but I think just because it sounds better with the fill versus become, but even remembering our wholeness, again, the same thing this is something I'm going to have to meditate on, because like you're challenging some of my thoughts, my ways of thinking, and not in a bad way, but in like because like now I'm playing with this whole idea of moderation. But to your point about moderation being, it's no one size fits all, right? Like the average 2,000 calorie diet. Guess what? I'm far more active than the average US person. Mm-hmm. I'm exercising X amount of hours. I should probably be eating more of certain things than some people, by nature of me being more active, by nature of me being out in the sun sweating. So what is moderate is heavily dependent upon what is you, what is authentic, what is your authentic pleasure, what is your truth.
Exactly. And that's where I think that's why our first conversation, we're like, oh my gosh, can we talk more? Because there is a distinct alignment when you are seeking for authentic pleasure, not just random pleasure, not just somebody else's pleasure. When you're seeking for your own authentic pleasure, you can only find your own authentic self, your truth. You can only uncover yourself, your whole. That's the destination. That's the being. That's the all. So when I now practice on a daily moment by moment basis, being in my authentic pleasure, I'm actually practicing being my authentic self. They're one and the same.
Okay. So when we do this, when we begin to tap into, because really, as with every great transformation, it starts with an awareness of a uncovering and remembering, oh, damn, this is my pleasure blueprint, if you will. This is my moderation, or this is my authentic truth inside of pleasure. How does one begin to create that awareness?
Yay! Do you know why I love the question? I sound like a total child, but it does get me so excited, because that is the most important question. How do I begin? How do I do this? I want that. And it is so much simpler than we think. I spent a lot of agony, but it actually is so much simpler than we think. There's a couple of ways that I generally recommend people to start. And one is mental, like with your mind. Because so much of us have really well-trained, active minds. We're very, very familiar with our mind world. And then one is body related. Yeah, right? We live up there. We were trained to live up there. That's where we got most of our comfort level of being. And if you want a shortcut, then you can actually also do a version through the body. And so I'm gonna share both, because again, if you want a shortcut, just do both. And then soon you'll find that the body version is way more enjoyable and quicker. You don't have to actually understand it all. So how do we get started knowing our authentic pleasure? Literally moment by moment. And I recommend people, whenever you're taking a drink of water, whatever your beverage of choice is, that you ask, what do I really want? If I had everything my own way is a great way to ask it. Alison Armstrong is someone who I've read. I love her. She talks about relationships. And she uses this word, if I had everything my own way, because it's really childlike, and it helps us to get into that state of, if I had everything my own way, which is usually the last time we really, really let ourselves imagine we could have everything we wanted. So if you practice on a daily basis, even just one time a day, at one moment a day, asking yourself, if I had everything my own way, what would I want right now? And this is a very cognitive way to start training yourself to ask, and even allow space to ask this. And just notice what happens. Because even if you ask that right now, yourself and myself, if I had everything my own way, what would I want right now? All kinds of things come. I'm on a podcast. I can't have everything I want right now. So all of the reasons why, I call them pleasure blocks, why you can't have the thing will come up. And then you start to actually realize how far away you are or how close you are to your authentic pleasure. So that's the first starting point that you can use your mind to do. And the body one, I'll tell you both. The body one is literally as if you're going to the doctor. Okay. You know how you go to the doctor and you have to
cough. Nope. Different one. Okay.
I don't experience the cough, but I know of the cough.
Right. So. Yeah, I get it. Different one. Sorry. Wrong podcast, guys. Tune in for the next one where we talk about cough. That's the name of the podcast.
It's too much fun. So when you go to the doctor, you have to describe whatever your ailment is, right? And you describe your body in a certain way. You're very descriptive of your body. And and if you go to the auto mechanic, same thing. You'll have to describe it with certain descriptor words. So what you can do is you can start doing that for yourself. Oh, what do I feel in my body? Once a day. And waking up in the morning is a good time to do it, unless you're a night owl. So then at night is better. Depends when. Or again, you're on the toilet, you're having a glass of water, things you're going to do every single day. And so once a day, you're going to actually notice one of your body parts that you can feel the most, because oftentimes it's our shoulders, maybe it's our stomach, because sometimes we get butterflies. I don't know. And then you actually describe it to yourself as if you were talking to your doctor. Because if I asked you, you think about, okay, and you may have already done some work like this. So an average person, if I ask them, what does your body feel like? Oh, it feels stressed. Oh, it feels, I can't even think of some of the words right now off the top, but we don't generally say,
hot,
oh,
unsettled.
my muscles are, what's that?
Could be hot, could be unsettled.
Yes, and unsettled.
Anxious.
There you go. There. Unsettled, anxious. Exactly. Our bodies we would never tell our doctor that my elbow feels anxious. That the doctor would be like, well, what does that feel like? And so when you can start actually feeling the sensations, and sometimes it's very hard to, like, I'm realizing I don't have a clue what my elbow feels like. I mean, it is a little chilly right now because I moved my hand, but if you touch your body part with your other hand, you can then cause a sensation. So my hand is freezing for some reason. So my arm feels cold when it touches it, if I didn't feel anything prior. And I'm telling you, those two techniques are the beginning stages of starting to become aware of what is your authentic pleasure. And there's lots of learning to give, but like you could literally practice that, be done with us on this conversation, and you will start to observe really where are you at in the world of pleasure and realize you could start adding it. So, and sorry, I should explain the body thing. The body thing, a lot of people don't realize our body is an early warning signal to our brains. It knows in advance if we're in pleasure or if we're stressed or if we're anxious. It knows ahead of time, but we don't often pay attention to it because of what we said earlier. Body is bad.
Yeah.
So if we can get back to hearing what our body is saying, we actually have advanced warning and a heads up. And you may even realize that you have way more information in your body than you realize, like your intuition, all of that stuff. But at the very beginnings of my learning around my body was, oh, wow, I didn't even notice that I get like little like twitches or something every time I've got to go to an event I don't like. And so then I can just start noticing twitches, for example. So you asked a simple question. That's a very long-winded answer.
Okay. So there's two main ways we can do this. One is cognitively, one is through our body. Cognitively is through asking a question. Restate that question for me, please.
If I had everything my own way, what do I want right now?
Okay. If I had everything my way, what would I want right now? And then the second is through our body, which in essence you're saying.
Body reveals is what I learned this through Jaya with the Erotic Blueprints. Actually, it was really where I embodied a lot of the practices I'd already learned. And so, she calls them body reveals. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then in the body reveals, this is about focusing on the sensations and using descriptors that actually describe a feeling. So
a sensation.
Sensation.
A feeling often gets mixed up. Sensation and feeling are synonyms, but it also has other meanings. So sensation.
So if I grab my arm and I say, oh, it feels hot.
Yes.
Would heat that be a sensation?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay.
Anything you would tell your doctor. That's an easy way to remember it.
We all need to practice talking to our doctors, people. If you're like me and you avoid doctors at all costs, then your skill or your proficiency might be at a lower level. So we'll work on it.
Yes. Yes. Anything you would tell your car dealer about your body? Yeah, no, that doesn't translate. Okay, I don't have any. I know this.
Okay. So now we have some tactics. Yeah. I personally, and I'm just way fascinated by this whole erotic blueprint. Are we ready to uncover?
See, this is perfect. This has been foreplay at its most. This has been
absolutely
teasing, anticipation, and
it plays into my type.
Right? So there's 5 types, and I'll give you I literally tonight I'm doing a 2-hour class on this, and even that I can't get enough in there, and it's a 8 module, usually over 16 weeks program. It's dense. Okay, so I want to give you guys a taste of this. So there's 5 types: energetic, sensual, sexual, kinky, which is, I'm going to ask you to consider that it's called naughty, okay? Because kinky conjures up a lot of ideas. And it's not any of those ideas, and it could be any of those ideas.
It both is and is not.
Correct. So we'll come back to that. I'll explain more. And shapeshifter. So that's energetic, sensual, sexual, kinky / naughty, and shapeshifter, okay? And all of these types, you may already be like, oh my gosh, what is that? I've never heard of that. I know sensual, blah, blah, blah. So just throw out the window everything you already know. Consider this is like nothing you've ever heard. And then everything has a superpower. Everything has a shadow. Everything has a turn on. And I'm just going to give you a couple tidbits examples. And all of this is very much focused on eroticism in the bedroom, nakedness with yourself, knowing your own body, or sharing and expressing your relationship with another human. But it truly is a way of being around pleasure in general. But we're going to zoom in just for a moment around the erotic moment. Okay. So energetic. This is not like Energizer Bunny. It's not like you've got endless energy. It's not like that.
No, that's me.
Right. Energetic means that you can feel the energy, and you are very aware, or you have the capacity to become very aware of the energy around you, in others. You know the vibe. You feel vibes. Vibes matter to you. So for this person, their big turn on is space, anticipation, tease. So if you're an energetic out there and you're like, oh my gosh, you've been loving the fact of like, yeah, this erotic blueprint thing is that we're going to talk about it, but we didn't get right to it. Like that anticipation felt lovely. Yeah.
That's me.
So superpower of energetic is they don't need to be touched to experience pleasure because they're experiencing it on an energetic level. So you can be across the room and experience intense erotic pleasure and pleasure in general. So that's a superpower of the energetic type. And the shadow is, and it's kind of like you can see where this lines up with that particular superpower. The shadow is this person. If you get too close, too fast, you are going to turn off. You may even disassociate from your body and disconnect from body. And yeah, you're going to go through the ropes if you're in a relationship, but you are not present. And so another shadow that happens is that person can actually, that type is more prone to being in a trauma circumstance because their boundaries are crossed much more frequently because their boundaries are so much further out. And they're not aware of it. And this is the least known erotic pleasure type. Energetics, who finally realize that this is like a way into eroticism, are like, oh, I thought I was asexual. I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought my libido was low. I thought da 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 da. And their partner was like, I thought that of you. I thought that of you. I thought that of you. So it's a really massive aha. Yeah.
Okay. So this is really interesting. space is a necessity, which I find to be fascinating. So when I went through this whole process, I believe that this and another type, kinky, or as you said, what was the other word you said? Naughty, if you will. Those were my primaries. However, I think primary was the kinky. But in this one, you just brought something to my awareness, which is the importance and need for space, or at least in the beginning, right? There's, in a way, it's almost like this unconscious energetic need that needs to be satisfied through some level of teasing, through some level of the unknown, perhaps, of what is around the corner. So what is something typical that is really going to get these types of people like in their zone, in their pleasure? What is going to activate that for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Anything that would be, so I'm going to anchor it to what we kind of know in the world.
Yeah.
Anything that's considered romance or foreplay will land in the neighborhood. Now, everyone has their own flavor of what that looks like. Some it's totally cheesy and not at all appealing, but that concept is going to be a turn on for this person. One in particular is literally eye gazing, connecting eyes. It doesn't even have to be that major thing, but eye connection is massive way to spark something in this person. Also dialogue, but I want to make sure, because I'm realizing this, we could dive into this. Can I go through all of them and then we come back and talk? Because I find it very hard for myself I really will dive in too far and then I'll miss out. And then poor shapeshifters and kinkies will be like, wait, I wanted to know more.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. So sensuals, they're like amazing. So sensuals basically are turned on by sensory things. So it is as the name seems. So sounds, music, sometimes silence, smells, candles, certain essential oils, whatever it is your thing, mowed grass. Anyway, so you get the whole idea. So when they're in their pleasure zone, they're having full body pleasure because they love all of the senses, all the touch, all the smells, everything. And environment is like so important for them. So their shadow actually is they're in their head constantly because everything is talking to them. Like, for example, right now, I just got annoyed by this plant bugging me. That was bugging me. And so that turns me out, that gets me out of the moment, the present moment of pleasure. So in sex, that person's in their head constantly. What do I look like? Oh, that smell. What's that smell? Oh, your breath. Oh, stop touching me that hard. Like, it's just nonsense. And it's great. And I can say that because I am a sensual. So it really can take you out and turn you off, like really just shut it all down real fast. If something shifts in the environment, that is not your version of pleasure. Okay. And a turn on for them, so many, but once you know their certain type, like there's certain tastes in their senses, then a meal, music, dancing, like anything like art or going to a museum, these are all turn-ons. And then when you're getting to eroticism, then you just keep building up to that. But again, energetic and sensual, they're not the get right to it. We're going to get to the get right to it person in a second. So they like the building up, right? Now, energetic, absolutely longer. The sensual, yeah, they love that. Like that meal ahead of is really, really delicious for them. Or the music ahead of getting into naked moments or meals and naked moments, whichever. So so I covered the turn on. So then I'm going to skip to sexual. The sexual, and again, this is an abbreviated, there's a lot more here. And so know that if you don't quite hear yourself in this, you may want to there's a quiz and you may want to do the quiz to learn a little bit more about it. So sexual is the get right to it. So you've been annoyed like crazy for how long it took me to get to Erotic Blueprints. Back when we said it, you're like, okay, great. This is going to be a great podcast. And then maybe you're not even here anymore. You might have gone.
I'm gone until now. I came right back. I'm like, yes, here we are. Boom.
We're good. So what the superpower or that pleasure zone is for the sexual is they really bring ease and fun around sex. They really, really do. Sex for them is like air, water, food, sex. It's right there. It's one of the most essential things. What gets them in their shadow zone is foreplay. They think people are insane and broken if they can't just get like turned on like that. They think they'll really be in a I'm better than you in sex if you can't do that. And they also are, if an orgasm doesn't happen, they're really either hard on themselves or hard on their partner. We blame either our partners or ourselves. It's just kind of how we do it because we were brought up in a very judgy kind of culture, all of us. Okay, so that's sexual. Their turn on is anything. Now they're very classic-y, like what we see in the media, okay, around sex. So anything, innuendos around sex, direct touch of erogenous zones, loving it. Sex jokes, like they just love it, love it, love it. So, okay, kinky. I'm zipping through this. Kinky.
I'm not a sexual, but I like sex jokes because they're just funny. When somebody is willing to put one out there, I'm going to appreciate it because I am the guy who's like, yeah, be your most authentic weird self around me, so that way I can indulge in the delicacy that is your beautiful expression. So
yeah, and that actually might come out with I've not really seen it, but I can see why that would fit with kinky because you shared kinky where you showed up as because. Kinkies, so I'm going to call it naughty for a moment here so you can detach from whatever kinky means in your mind, everybody who's listening, because we all have a version of what we think that is.
Yeah, most of us are probably going to thinking that one time I read 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah, exactly. So kinky type is the person who enjoys something that is naughty or taboo for them. Mm-hmm. So I always use this classic example that the creator Jaya uses is where she had a client who was like, they were in their 70s. They'd always done missionary position. They went home after doing a session with her. They were like, they came back and they were so excited because they did a different position. And they were like, oh, we're kinky. That was so exciting. So clearly, that isn't what we would think of as kinky, but that turned them on because it was taboo and on an edge for them. So it's what is your edge that turns you on. That's the kinky. And their superpower is creativity as a result, because anything can be taboo and naughty. Everything can be used. I mean, look, lipstick. I got lipstick. Think of 1,000 ways. I'm sure your mind is going wild of ways you can make this erotic or pleasurable, right? And maybe that's why sex jokes actually align with a kinky person, because there's creativity and you get to talk about taboo in public. So that would actually fit up with kinky as well.
Yeah, imagine that the guy who's all about radical truth is all about the taboo and the expression of the taboo.
Imagine. I too. And here's the thing: our types. I'm sensual kinky. Our types are our starting point. I talk about them as if you're going to travel the world. There's 5 continents. You happen to have been born in one spot. So that's your language of first language, et cetera. It's your easy point. It's your default. It's your revving yourself up. But you can actually expand into all the pleasure types. There's no boredom needed here in the world of pleasure because you get to travel the world of pleasure. So the shadow of kinky is shame, actually, is the biggest shadow. And they deal with the most shame because if you think of it, their pleasure is right up at what's taboo. So they're constantly at a moment of pleasure, shame. And so that's a very interesting journey around pleasure because there's a lot of self-discovery. There's a lot of finding yourself in that journey of pleasure, actually. Because you have to, if you're going to fight for pleasure, you also have to learn how to navigate shame very, very effectively as a kinky, or playing in the kinky continent of pleasure.
Yeah. And I can imagine you have to be an extremely smooth sailor, an experienced sailor in that realm, because I know for myself that pretty much 99% of my sexual experiences in my life have been ridden in shame and guilt and not enoughness and all of that shows up. And normally pleasure is extremely missed. I've expressed this to partners in the past, and I always tried to get them to see it objectively because it was just I didn't understand myself. But I would say that most of my sexual encounters throughout my entire life were almost exclusively not really that great. And it wasn't their fault. It was whether it was because of sexual trauma from the past I'd experienced, or if it was you maybe use this and I didn't know what I was about, or there was some energetic blockage, like whatever it was, that was prevalent. And I always tried to get them to understand and have an awareness that way there wasn't this heaviness on them, but normally it did. It normally came back to them and they felt bad. Like, well, this is my fault. Like I'm supposed to know how to make you experience pleasure. And it's like, no, it's not. It's not your job. It's my job to know and to communicate to you. And sure, we can go down this road together and learn together, and we can make this a conjoined effort, much like how I want to, go down this path with you. But at the same time, there has to be a mutual understanding that as long as shame and guilt and make wrong and fear and unworthiness and sadness are the context from which we are creating, there is absolutely no space for love, because you can't have two things in the same place. You can't have love and have shame. You can have an intention of love, but you can't have the experience of love if shame is what is present. And to remove that from the equation and to be able to acknowledge, hey, shame's going to come up, but hey, it's okay. There's no wrong. It's going to come up. The inevitable truth is that it's programmed for, into me or you or whoever it is. But being able to see it and say, there's the shame, and to communicate that with one's partner, say, I'm feeling really shameful right now. I'm feeling really gross. I'm feeling, this isn't your fault. This is on me, but I just want to talk about it because you're my partner and I care about you. And this is something that I haven't really personally put into practice, but I know that me being on this mission that I've on with radical truth and honesty, and how liberating it started to happen, or what started to happen as a result of doing it has been major. But the thing that still scares me the most is being radically honest regarding my sexuality with a potential partner whom in my brain I haven't sealed the deal with. Meaning opening up about these types of conversations if we're not in a committed relationship, because, well, if you know this about me, then you couldn't possibly love me. Yeah. And that's,
oh my gosh,
that's hard.
You're tying in so much, because we talked about like how we, and so many of us, I would say all of us to a certain degree, experienced a shutdown at some point around pleasure, and then especially around body, and then combining the two, pleasure with body. And so there's so many messages that aren't just in our minds. Remember, like I was saying, like we have to we can address this cognitively, or we can address it in our body. They're also in our bodies. We embody those messages. We embody those experiences. And so I'm so glad you paused at the topic of shame and how if there was one thing out of that I would want to say is that we're this misunderstanding that our sex life is a coupledom only is such a disservice to our relationships. And I think a lot of us now get that no one is responsible for my happiness, but no one's responsible for our pleasure either. And why I think that's so entangled is because if I say to people, how's your sex life? Which I rarely say so bluntly, but let's say they know what I do. How's your sex life going?
How's your sex life going? Well, it's about as dry as the Sahara over here. That basketball scoreboard looks like 0 to 0 to 0 to 0 in the past 10 years.
Right? And this response is actually often what comes up. If people know what I do, well, I don't have a sex life. And what if the biggest thing I can impart on people who are in relationship and people who are not yet in relationship, or who don't even want to be in relationship, because there's a lot who are choosing intentionally to be alone, like not alone, but on their own. And is that we are actually having a sex life journey ourselves from birth to death. And if we're in partnership, our partner is having a sex life journey from birth to death on their own. And at some point along the way, you choose, or you choose to come together in relationship, you then have a third sex life journey. And obviously I'm speaking in a broad term what I mean by sex life journey, but I really am meaning about our relationship to our body and our body experience in the world. So we all had sexual experiences from very, very young, and we probably would have never called them sexual because, of course, in our culture, that would be just disgusting would be the term, right? But if you think about it, a hug is a body relatedness that is sexual in certain contexts. And so we're learning about hugs as children. We're learning about consent or lack of consent as hugs as children, or kisses goodbyes, greetings, physical greetings with loved ones. No one really sees that as a sex act, but that's a training that lives with you when you get into sex encounter. That's a typical sex encounter. And then you talk about the specific occurrences, like first time, that you discovered you have a body part that feels good. Oh my gosh. Or a wet dream or menstruation, like all of these things. You have these moments and they're outside of your relationship. Those all feed in, and moments that were supposed to be pleasurable and they weren't. And there was trauma around that. And so all of that is a part of your sex life. And what becomes so empowering for a single person coming into a relationship, if they've already gotten clear on what is my authentic pleasure around my body, around my whole world, do I have language for it? Can I even let myself think about it? Can I verbalize it to myself? Can I journal about it? You don't even have to verbalize it to any other human, but if you can verbalize it to yourself, and then you get into a private relationship with someone, because a lot of people are very private. They wouldn't even share this with their close friends, right? But that's not even necessary. But if you can practice languaging it and conceptualizing it and embodying it, when you get into a relationship, those concerns around, oh, what if I share what my pleasure is? What if I don't know how to talk about shame? If you haven't practiced it on your own, it is a very scary, scary circumstance. It's very high risk, actually. High risk. And so we often avoid it. Until then, I see couples who are lifers and they've spent a long time not communicating. And it's actually really, really hard to repair from that place.
That doesn't work. Yeah, no, when we revoke our ability as humans to communicate, which obviously is all revolved around truth, when we withhold our truth, as I've been saying, that truth withheld is poison and truth expressed as medicine. That's just what's so. And especially in intimate relationships, I know that the times when I had healthiest relationships is when we were in truth, is when we would have those difficult conversations, when we'd be willing to dive into that uncomfortability, even amidst, the potentiality for shame, right? You open the door and immediately you see these words just pop up, and there's like a potential for shame and guilt and everything that comes with diving into potentially controversial topics. When you go through that thickness, what is often on the other side is a sense of freedom. And yeah, it requires some level of discomfort, but resistance is the compass towards that which we seek the most in life. It has occurred to me very frequently.
Mm-hmm. Resistance is futile also came into my mind. What movie is that from? Resistance is futile. Anyway, I don't have some random thought that came in my mind. Shapeshifters are probably dying out there. I'll share that briefly. And I know we're coming to our end. Poor shapeshifters. I love you, shapeshifters. Actually, the majority of my couples clients, one partner is a shapeshifter because it can be a really interesting thing to navigate. Shapeshifters love pleasure of all kinds. And they are turned on by all of those types before us. They are the chameleon and they are the shapeshifter. They are the superhero of sex. They actually have
winners.
They have this massive capacity for sexual pleasure. And that's one of their superpowers because they can meet their partner in any space. They have the capacity for it. Now, a lot of them, the downside is they can also carry the shadows of all of those types as well. And one of their common shadows is that they feel like they're too much. They're too much. Even in everyday life, they're told to focus. They're told to, they're expecting too much. They're wanting too much. They are too much. So that's a really key shadow. And turn-ons for shapeshifters really are when all of those types are mixed in. They love all of them together. That's their most satisfying pleasure, is when they get a little bit of all of those other four types. So that's kind of the gamut of all the erotic blueprint types. And there's more elements to the blueprints, but that's the type system. And it's really, even if that's all you ever get, that's a huge piece that is so missing for us to know in this world, our conversation around pleasure in the bedroom.
Okay. So First and foremost, if you're somebody who is dating a shapeshifter, you better start researching, because apparently you have your hands full with identifying what is one perfect scene with all of the different mechanisms and bringing it all together. That's fun.
And if you are dating or with a shapeshifter, you may feel like you are backed into a corner and you don't understand why. That's usually the experience. No, not any more sex.
No more. I need a break.
Yeah.
So now, so we've played with a little bit of them. We've created a little bit of foundation. Mm. Can we dive a little bit deeper into each of them? What would be, because I think the original question I asked you, let's get through them. I was like, okay, cool. Was what is a scenario that would really activate each of the types? Obviously, it would vary from person to person depending on their particular interest, but there, I would imagine there's some kind of baseline.
Yeah, we can just play and be creative about it, and then people can kind of take it from there. So a scenario that an energetic, and here's the cool thing is we're not just one thing, we are a blend. And so that we won't really get into that. And there's something called stacking where you can actually play with the ordering of them. So we'll just keep it very simple. So let's say you're 100% energetic type, and you would really, really love anything that is allowing you to connect with yourself, with the universe, with soul. People tend to gravitate towards Tantra practice. And so if you don't know about it and you think you're an energetic, go check that out. That's a great practice for you. It's a very soulful, spiritual, relatedness to your body. And so that's one way. I don't know if that answers your question. You're asking for a scenario. Like, are you like saying like date examples or evening outs with your partner? What would help answer that question?
Yeah. So
it's like so wide, the playground of that question.
Yeah. So I'm imagining like, take me in like a little mini, like a little mini flash of a movie, like a scenario, like a scene that they would really appreciate. Which, by the way, that answer was really great. By the way, the layout for the energetic.
Okay, let's go for sensual then. Okay, let's go for sensual, because then we've answered that for energetics a little bit. Sensuals, for your experience of the sensual would be very much enjoying the beauty of life, enjoying the environment. So that person, if you are that person, let's talk about an individual who is not in relationship, because it's really important that we feed our own pleasure type. So you would be really wise to plan an outing for yourself that is well thought out about all your sensual needs. What clothing are you going to wear would really, really, really matter. So pick the most enjoyable clothing. Oh, when we were starting to do the filming of this, you saw me like dealing with what I was wearing. Oh, do I want my sweater or not? My sweater's here because I'm a sensual primary, and it really matters to me enjoying the moment and being present to the moment. So as a sensual, that really matters. So if your partner is sensual, you may ask, oh, do you need a sweater? Do you need that? Is there something that can help you with the temperature, for example? Like anything like the environment, if you're paying attention to it. What's your most delicious food that you want to eat that time? And again, our taste buds change. So you get to discover in that moment, if I had everything my own way as a sensual, what would I enjoy and indulge in? That's where Haagen-Dazs comes in. And would I love to go and listen to music or live music? Would I love to go dancing? Would I love to be enjoying a landscape that I adore? And then that will really set the tone for you to then come and be connected to your body and come back and you can be connected to your body in a very PG way. And it's also erotic, and people forget this. Literally, think of how delicious hand holding is when you're first dating. It seems so PG, but that's one of the most, they say that the hands express so much. And so it's one of the most erotic things you can do. And so sensuals love that especially. So that's something on sensual. Sexual. Let's set the stage for sexual. Now I'm going to use a shopping experience to like really translate this. I'm not bringing sex into this, but a sexual will be a shopper who knows exactly what they want. They will have a shopping list. They will go in, they will get it. They will pay, they will leave, and they will be done. They get right to it, and they're satisfied, and it's done. Boom. Anything that lingers or delays will drive them crazy. So for them, erotically, that
would mean me. I would drive them freaking bananas.
Yes. So some pleasure types, they have lost in translation situations. So someone's speaking Mandarin and the other person's speaking English from England, and they're like, I do not compute. And so you can learn each other's languages. So I want to encourage you. You can learn each other's languages and have a whole other world open up to you. So the sexual loves quickies. They love doing things like they might be like, okay, I'm having a lunch break. Let's meet, let's rendezvous, and we're going to meet here. And they would love to do some sexting, but not too much, because that's too much foreplay. Maybe 5 minutes before, just to plan out what you're going to do. Okay, I'm going to do this. You're going to do that. And then they get right to it, and you're done, and then you're back. And that was super satisfying. And let's do that again for dinner. So they would do that. Kinky. Oh my gosh. Kinky is like so many scenarios. One thing I didn't mention is some kinky types, naughty types, they don't even need to fulfill on a fantasy. They are a psychological kink. They actually get thrilled by the idea of naughtiness, and to play it out isn't really their thing. And then there's others who are a sensual kink, like a tactile, and they are more into the ropes and the bondage and all the 50 Shades of Grey kind of stuff. Okay. And you can be both, but sometimes you can be one or the other. And so a great date for kinky is take them to a place where you can go on roller coasters, or you can fly out, jump out of a plane, or you do something you've never done before that will terrify you slightly, but you feel safe. Like you feel safe, but you're terrified slightly. And then you'll get them all excited, and that'll actually be a turn on. It literally will lead into an erotic turn on. And then you really do need to be aware of safety, meaning, are you feeling safe? Not comfortable, safe. And so that is really key to not trigger the shadow side of the kinky type. And you need to own that for yourself. You need to know, and you can practice this and play kinky by yourself as well. You can imagine things. And you can even use ropes, like do it safely, like a scarf or something. So this is an example of a night out with yourself at home in COVID times. Take a tie of or like a scarf or something. You do it safely, and you put it up on something, and then you make your own resistance, and then you masturbate that way. That's a great example for a kinky, and you can add in some, I don't know, character or person that you'd like to engage with, and you can bring the psychological in. So kinky could be everything and so many things. So that's a bit of kinky. Shapeshifter. Oh, okay. Shapeshifter tend to be like, I want sex all the time. Okay. I had a client and there was time issues were part of the challenge of why they weren't being intimate in their relationship. And so we mapped out what was the ideal time, what was the existing time, and how did they want to actually own their time and make time pleasurable. And so he had done one spreadsheet, which was his like wish list, but then he did another one. And again, we did this in Excel because I'm a total nerd. But and so he did another spreadsheet that literally had sex all the time. And he's like, that's the real one. It was so funny.
That's the real one.
So a shapeshifter is basically constantly thinking of sex as a topic. They actually will philosophize.
That sounds exhausting.
Yes, for a lot of people it is, but the shapeshifter, they can't turn it off. It's like you talking about truth. You probably can't turn off the topic of truth. A shapeshifter can't turn off the topic of sex. It's actually an intriguing subject, almost like someone who races cars. They love racing cars, but they also love learning about cars in the world and the history of cars. Not only do they love having sex, they love philosophizing, thinking, considering about sex. So for them, a great evening would be going to some new sex thing, like so maybe a sex class, or watch a movie that has eroticism in it. And then you could weave in all of that stuff. Do some eye gazing, do some talking and engaging and being connected. And then come up with a naughty scenario that was like, you talk about what's your fantasy, and this is all over dinner, which is very, very delicious, and the environment is just perfect. That would be a lovely experience for a shapeshifter because you hit all the points. Oh, sexual. And then definitely do a quickie in the bathroom. There you go. That's your night for the shapeshifter.
Boom.
There.
Wow, that was fun. This is all conversations that are brand new for me. And can I say, when this was an idea baby, little did the idea baby know that this was going to be a conversation on it. And it was when it found out, it was very excited. Okay, so we've gone through the 5 types. I'm going to do my best to recap. We have the energetic, the sensual, the kinky, sexual, and the shapeshifter.
You got it. Yeah, nice.
We can, much like the Enneagram, and often are, a mixture of multiple of them, and not necessarily. I think you made a good point about this, that these aren't meant to be confining, like somebody's listening and they're saying, oh, but I'm more than one of those, right? It's like, it's meant to be more of a way to create a foundation, and then you go through and continue to create the awareness. And I think some people get messed up about it is, oh, well, it's not precisely down to the T right. If our analytical types, which is me, by the way, I'm speaking about myself, who like really, really take it to those depths, and everything has to be perfectly lined up on a spreadsheet. If it doesn't all check out, then there must be a lack of validity to it. But to really embrace it for what it is, which is a foundation. It's a way to start to distinguish and see, okay, I took the test, which I do recommend taking. I took the test. That was when I found out. I reaffirmed something that it's like I knew it, but I needed to remember it. And it, in a way, it created a level of compassion for myself, because even now I'm still going through like the having to get over the shame and guilt of it, but I at least understand it more to where I can say, this, at least right now, is not going away. And instead of trying to resist it, which I'm very clear that my results going down that path have been very lackluster at best, I can choose to create a context with a partner down the road where these types of conversations aren't off the table. And if they are, then that's probably not the person for me. Matter of fact, in me knowing that about myself and me saying this is something that's important to me, is being able to have this openness, my truth. If someone doesn't align with that, then I'm very clear that, well, then that person probably isn't for me. That's someone who is more likely to be able to satisfy that person. And that's what's important for them in that moment. Yeah. What has me curious is, I am the type where if I'm not exploring sexually inside of a relationship, I'm more than likely not to, because of my own deep philosophical and analytical mind surrounding what is right and what is wrong. So, for example, in some practices, I don't know if it's Stoicism, but definitely in some of the more esoteric principles where it says, non-release. Don't as a male, don't ejaculate and don't release, because you are essentially sending out your creative energy. You are draining the very life force that animates physical bodies, as a French term, as I've come to understand it, le petit mort, which means the little death. We die a little bit every single time we do. I don't know the validity of this, just what I've heard. People like myself are more than likely to not engage in solo practice because of some idea of how it's supposed to be. But I guess what I'm kind of dancing around and alluding to is, what are healthy ways to begin practicing self-practice by yourself if you don't have a partner? Because obviously if you have a partner, I think that probably simplifies a little bit more. It's, figure out what your blueprints are, and then start communicating with one another and start figuring that out. But for someone who is maybe on the shyer side of doing that with themselves, where would they start? What does that personal practice begin to look like?
Yeah. 2 things I want to share just from a perspective of being around this a little bit. It's actually way easier to do it as a single person than in couple, because you're not balancing and ping ponging off of other people's shame. Also, it's a lot harder to navigate, and that I couldn't say enough. And it's such a cultural thing that it's easier with a partner. It has to be a very, very good partnership that is full of communication, and you're willing to and able to navigate shame that is not yours, but comes up, and it might even be directed at you. So it is and that takes a skill set. And so it is way easier to do this on your own. So your question is so, so important. And then the other thing I wanted to share, there is a differentiation, and most of us are not taught this, but orgasm and ejaculation are separate functions, and oftentimes they happen at the same time, but you can orgasm without ejaculating. Mm-hmm. And so you can then practice maintaining your chi, your energy inside of you if you choose, if that's one thing that's important to you. So you can learn how to orgasm, and there's practicing on how to do that. It's a little more advanced, but it's how to do, I can't even think of the term right now, but basically where you learn how to bring yourself up to different stages of pleasure, and then you pause. And then you allow yourself to sit there, and it's almost like you're step walking up, and you can train yourself. People use this to train themselves how to hold on to orgasm so that they can be in sync with their partner, to build up chi and energy and then maintain it and not ejaculate. So I can't think of the name of that. Doesn't matter. But the concept is you build yourself up to a pleasure, and then you pause before you get to the climax, and you stay there and you experience it, and you breathe it through your chakras and your whole body. Yeah. So that's a really, especially for someone who's energetic, that's an amazing practice to do. And if you just focus on that one thing, that's huge, to try to bring yourself to. So do what you normally do for masturbating and self-pleasure, but pause 2 steps before your climax. Because when you get too close to climax, it's very frustrating. You don't want to frustrate yourself. You want to come to the point where you're feeling a nice peak, but you pause, and then you actually practice breathing that into other parts of your body. How far can that sensation that's around your pelvic zone? Normally sometimes it's only in your vulva or your penis, right? Because we just are so centralized around this, and we're so disconnected with our body. So if you can practice breathing it into the rest of your body. Yeah. And see, oh my gosh, could I get it to my big toe? Could I get that sensation to my eyebrow? I don't know. That takes a skill set. So don't rush yourself. It can take a lot to get it to your belly and get it to your thighs. Wow. And that's amazing practice for a single person. The other thing is, like you said, is to learn the erotic blueprint. You can practice learning about yourself through erotic pleasure, but sometimes that's not enjoyable as a single person. And it actually feels frustrating and feels unfair. We're very much in that mindset. You should be in a couple. You can practice your erotic blueprint and pleasure type, I call it, outside of the bedroom. You can actually start finding pleasure. And remember those questions, that question I asked, what would I really desire right now? If I had everything my own way, what I want right now? And then try to feed yourself, answer that question in line with your pleasure type, and really just start to discover outside of the bedroom. If you can, we are pleasure starved, not just erotic pleasure starved. And when we feed our pleasure in one area of our life, it is feeding our pleasure, period. People think that if we're not getting sex, then we need sex to resolve it. It is about pleasure as a whole person. So that's what I highly recommend, is you can practice bringing that into your self-pleasure somehow, or meaning like just try different touch types, take a class to learn a little bit more of that if you need some help with that. And then also practice that in everyday life, at the table, with a meal. Do it energetically, slowly. Do it savory. Make lots of sounds while you're eating your food. Do it sexually and just gobble it up and just think, wow, that was awesome. Do it kinky and eat a meal naked. Do it erotically or shapeshifter and weave all that in. You can do this in any area of your life as practice. And you start to use the language, and you start to get comfortable with pleasure language. It's very, very important. It really eradicates a lot of shame.
So in a way, it's taking all of that, going from now we have an awareness, but now bringing it into a practical day-to-day thing where through the natural doing of the thing, we gently remove the layers of the onion of shame and the cloud and the mist of the unknown. And we begin to cultivate that, which in a solo practice, I think is important, because if you're like me, if you don't have a partner, you just, fuck it. I'll just wait till I'm in a relationship. But I'm clear that in a way it's like avoiding doing the work. It's like, but if I were to do this work on my own and to really get to the root of what is it that I'm about, what do I like, what drives my pleasure, then when I come to a partner, I'm not having to give them a blank ass map and say, here, figure it out and tell me.
It's very, very stressful. It causes I coach couples who are in their second year, first year of relationship, and it's already stressful at that point. It's already become a thing. And you would not ever, as a conscious person, you would not go into a relationship saying, I'm going to deal with my nutrition and food. I'm going to make my partner and I figure that out together. And I'm fine if they do that with me too. No, like you work on your own desire for what your health is, like physical health, otherwise, right? You don't want to like say, oh, I want to wait until I get into partnership to figure out my movement or my sports I want to do or my yoga. You don't do that. That causes problems if you just wait for everything to get better when you're in relationship or your perfect life to show up. We just have a missing in the area of pleasure because it was a missing conversation. So we just assume that's a relationship thing, but it's not. It actually can destroy relationships. Yeah.
Oh, it all starts at home.
All starts at home. This was awesome.
Okay.
I loved this conversation.
It's been brilliant. I have one more thing I want to ask because it came up in my awareness as you were talking, which is this has been a controversial thing in my space as well, which is pornography.
Yes.
And I just felt compulsive need to ask because I've heard about the brain science behind how it literally like jacks up our gray matter and how it has negative effects. And for someone like me who didn't have, there was a time where like pornography was the only way that I was sexually expressing myself. And there was a lot of shame and guilt around that, even like acknowledging here on an open microphone. I'm just like, the fact that I'm actually saying it with like very little hesitation about it. But that was something that was very, very hidden was the use of pornography because of all the shame around it. But what is your experience of that as it pertains to this field? Is it something to stray away from? Is it something to be avoided at all costs, exit off? Or is it, hey, you know what? Every once in a while it has its place. Why not? Or maybe you enjoy the taboo of it and you watch it with a partner or whatever it is. Like, what is your personal take on it as it pertains to our erotic pleasure?
I'm glad you brought this up. This is a really, really common dilemma, I would say. There's a lot of opinions and a lot of strong opinions out there. And then you get into relationship and those strong opinions haven't gotten anywhere. And it can become very hurtful of self. Like you think something wrong, I'm broken, I can't stop this, I have to have this. The partner's like thinking, what's wrong with me? Don't you like me? Don't you love me? Do you think I'm ugly? There's just, it has a very destructive nature to it. But I don't think the destructive nature is the thing itself. I think it's what we've labeled it as. And I'm not saying there isn't destruction in pornography. Pornography itself as an industry has things to look at. Like a lot of industries, there are things to look at in the pornography industry that are like conscious. Are they conscious? Are they really being their higher selves in the way they're designing those environments for those people doing it and for who they're thinking of it? And then there's the underground and the underage and all that. There's a lot of is it conscious content or is it not? And I think that equates to how we put anything in our brain. And so so for example, what are you watching on Netflix, everyone? Like same thing. Is it conscious content or is it not conscious content? And so if we can peel apart what pornography is, I think it's really, really important. Remember I told you about the dissecting of ideas and beliefs? There is so much layered shame on pornography, partly because it's related to body. And if we pull the body piece out and the bad and wrong about body, then there are other layers to look at. So that's when I say, is it conscious? Are they being conscious and conscientious of who's involved? There's a lot of conscious porn out there. So let's take the unconscious porn off the table for a second. So we're dissecting the frog here. So bad and wrong about body, take it off. Bad and unconscious content, take that off for a minute. And this is conscious porn. Okay, then this comes down to what is your authentic pleasure?
I've never had this happen before. My apologies.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay. No, it usually means that I find when tech stuff happens, it means wrap it up. That's like literally, I believe in the energy of it because this is an energy form. So anyway, all that to say is there are layers to pornography and you have to really dissect the layers for yourself first. And that's my take on pornography. It's a very layered topic and it can be very destructive if you don't look at it straight in the face and truthfully as you advocate for it. You have to do that individually first though. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, because we've been through a variety of conversations, everything from the 5 erotic blueprints, your own personal journey into it regarding, going through depression and how pleasure and that path of pleasure and finding your own unique pleasure really helped you to step into a space where you could begin to embody this energy and this passion that is you. Yeah. And to share a space with other people to unlock that potential within themselves and to do the same. And now here we are, really demystifying what I think a lot of what this conversation was about finding, and this is really interesting, finding your moderate.
I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, finding your moderate, finding your middle way, figuring out what works for you. Because I'm one of those people heavily. I mean, like you said it, like kinkies, the naughties. They most of what their decisions are based in is the avoidance of like this shame. But there's so much shame that's riddled into it. But I think in general, to some degree, like we have that experience around our beingness, and it's being able to find that space between full blown hedonism and full blown stoicism and the avoidance of all of it. Somewhere in between, we can find that truth. And I guess it's just being open and okay. Because for me, as it pertains like pornography, it was, well, it must be all bad. Right. So I need to completely avoid it. Yep. So then it left me in a place where I guess I should just do nothing because that's all I've ever known. And so to advocate that moderation, to advocate that people find their way, their unique pleasure, their unique truth. Yeah. I think that's so beautiful and brilliant. And I can't thank you enough for sharing all of that with us.
Thanks. It was a pleasure. I really do enjoy your energy and I enjoy this conversation. And I'm really grateful for anyone who's stuck around with this long. I'm really grateful that you did that as well. I don't take that lightly. So thank you for anyone who's still listening.
And those who do are the ones who are meant to get it.
Exactly.
Awesome. And if people want to stay connected with you, get more into the yummy world that is finding our authentic pleasure, where can people find you?
Yeah, I'll go through all the tags. Beth at BethOstrander.com. So my website is my name, BethOstrander.com. On Instagram, it's Beth Ostrander 1. And on Facebook, Beth Ostrander 393. These are total random numbers, although Beth Ostrander 1, fits me, that's fine with me. So those are all the places. And maybe I could provide the link for the quiz because that would be awesome. The more people that can take the quiz and get this awareness, I would love that.
That will be in the show notes.
Okay, perfect.
And everything that we've discussed, if there is one thing that somebody could take from this and begin to apply to what I would say is really the root of this conversation is finding their authentic pleasure. What is one thing practically, spreadsheets and all, if need be, they can do to unlock that potential?
Yeah. Ask yourself as often as you can each day, once a day, at least, if I had everything my own way, what would I like to do right now? What do I desire right now? And just start practicing asking yourself that. That's magical.
Brilliant. Beth, thank you so much for being here, for taking time out of your precious life with your family, with your work, with yourself, to be here and to share this conversation with me. It means the world to me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I loved it. I enjoyed it fully.
Sweet.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are listening again, thank you if you stuck around this long. It's been a fun journey. And as always, you're diving into these realms, this unknown, this uncertainty, this sometimes seemingly scary world. Just know that on the other side of that unknown, that fear, that uncertainty is oftentimes a major breakthrough in self-actualization, if you will, stepping into our highest potential. And as always, continue to find, follow, and live your truth and unleash and follow the wolf within you. How? Peace. Thank you so much for listening in. If you got value out of this message, we would love it if you subscribed and shared it with your tribe so we can continue to share this message and this medicine with people all over the world. Much love and peace be with you.